Hello, back again. No, actually, let's pretend like this is a different day and I didn't double book or nothing because my depressed brain has forgotten how to schedule, apparently. But yes, this is also a conversation that I have been really looking forward to with my Instagram friend, Kesang. Kesang's work explores gender, identity, and sexuality and their intersection with statelessness and transnationality. She's the co-founder of Chomo, a feminist resource group working with Tibetan and other Himalayan communities. So I'm just going to quickly bring her on the live and we're going to have this really exciting conversation about just body and identity and what it looks like during the pandemic, and especially for communities which don't get featured in the mainstream so much. So just going to quickly attempt to add her. Give me a moment. Listen to me sing or attempt to sing while I add her. Okay, I'm just gonna send her. Okay. So basically, like, we're doing this live because we were inspired by. Thank you, Cuterus, for saying I'm pretty. I haven't washed my hair today, but I think I'm pulling it off. But the reason why we wanted to talk today is because, like, Kesang had posted a few days ago about how people have a body and the changes that, like, she's experienced during the pandemic, right? So I mean, it really resonated with me because that's been the hi, hello.
Hi.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, we're fine. Great,
Yeah.
awesome.
I think there's a little bit of a lag, but like otherwise it's fine.
Yeah, we'll make it work.
All right.
Yeah. No, Kesang, I was just sharing with our audience about how a few days ago you'd posted about how people have been feeling like it's okay to just comment on the changes that your body has experienced, like whether
Yeah.
during the or just like bodies change over time, like deal with
In
it,
general. Yeah.
right? And like how
Yeah.
people think it's okay to sort of just comment on them, whether it's positive or negative, like bring attention
Yeah.
to another person's body and make those kind of intrusive observations, and how that sort of
Yeah.
inspired us to be like, hey, let's talk about it and let's explore it, particularly from maybe your identity as a Tibetan person, and
Yeah.
I was just telling our audience about how, like, bodies that don't get featured in the mainstream as much, like what does
Hmm.
scrutiny look like when it comes to them. So yeah, very excited to have this conversation with you. Maybe we could
Thank you for
start off,
having me.
of course. Maybe we could just start off a little bit with sort of understanding where that angst came from for you, right? Why did that question feel uncomfortable for you?
Yeah. I think in general, like we as women, we're so used to having people remark upon our bodies, our faces, like, just even if we gain a little bit of weight or like, I have struggled with acne for a few years now, and like, these sorts of like comments have I think like it seems very natural for people to comment on another person's body, and especially if it's a woman's body. And we are so used to it that like a lot of the times we don't even pay attention to that. We try to make excuses saying that, oh, no, yeah, I ended up eating a lot during winter, you know how it is. And we make excuses like even though we don't need to. um, and I think, like, in the last few years, through my journey of exploring what my body and because of the gendered nature of this body, like, how do I interact with other people? How do I interact with the society in general, right? Like, when I started thinking more critically about these things, like, that's when I found this space where I, like, now I feel like, it's okay to actually say, like, this is my body. Like, I look at myself every day in the mirror, sometimes, like, more than 5 to 10 times, right? And like, I know exactly what changes my body is going through. And like, I don't need you to, like, point it out to me, and specifically not make me feel insecure about it. So
Mm,
this is the time when I actually felt like, okay, generally, like, I do get comments like that, but why not just, like, put it out there and say that, like,
yeah.
I don't want to hear you say things like that. It was uncomfortable for, like, both parties, and a lot of people ended up saying sorry to me too, but that's okay.
Right, right. No,
Yeah.
what you're saying is also resonating with me on multiple levels, because it's not just like those positive, those negative comments that come our way, and wherein
Yeah.
they like point out these flaws. I mean, I know that I have a pimple on my face, or I know that I have hair
Yeah.
in my armpit. Like, I don't need you to like tell. It's not a show and tell.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to point and like label what that is for me, and then like say that in a derogatory
Yeah.
way. Where I think I'm finding myself like a bit repulsed by just like positive comments on my body as well. In the sense that sometimes I just don't want you to look at my body as an object that you make an observation on. I don't need you to tell me
Yeah.
that. So someone recently commented about how I've put on some weight, so my tits look bigger.
Mm.
It's okay if I say that. That's different. It's okay if I'm
Yeah.
owning that and I'm feeling a certain way, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily like it. It wasn't welcome when
Yeah.
this said it, and I
Yeah.
feel it's a bit tough because also since there is so much validation and importance that is attached to a person's
Hmm.
appearance. It
Yeah.
is also a bit tough to like say that I actually don't enjoy like comments on my body, whether like positive or negative,
Hmm.
and be swayed away like by the positive piece. And for some people
Yeah.
that's nice. Maybe they like to receive compliments about their body, and that's great, and that's
Yeah.
absolutely, and they can make that choice for themselves. But like when it comes to me, I just don't want comments, and I will
Yeah.
ask for it. I will ask you how I'm looking if I need you to
Yeah.
comment on my body. What do you think about that? Hear your thoughts on this.
I think like, I can only speak from my own experience, and
Yeah.
like, from the conversations that I have had with my friends or other people, right? And I think for a lot of people who have grown up with or have experienced sort of any kind of insecurity about their bodies, right? Which is basically most of us at some point or another, right? But like, especially for people who have had, I think, like, eating disorders, or like, have struggled with acne, like, for a large chunk of their lives, or I have friends who have, like, what we call chicken skin, right? And
Mm,
like, any sort of, like, physical like, diversion from what is supposed to be beautiful and what is supposed to be perfect in the eyes of people, right? If any of us have experienced that, I think, like, even if it's like, positive comments, like, there is a certain part of us that feels like, oh my God, like, this person commented, like, let's say, like, you said, somebody remarked that your boobs look bigger, right? Like, it sounds great, but like, there, I think for me, like, there's always this question, like, okay, if I gain weight, like, my boobs look bigger, so that's nicer, but then, like, my tummy is also, like, bigger, right? Like, that's also
yeah,
hanging out, and that's not nice. So, like,
yeah,
what do I do? And
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
need that pressure, right? Like, my
Right.
body is, it just is, like, the body should be allowed to just exist, and like, we should be able to have, like, this healthy relationship with our own bodies, because a lot of the times it's a reflection of how we are doing mentally, emotionally, on a very spiritual level too. I think, like, our relationship with ourselves, that's reflected physically. And
Correct.
we should just, like, have that space to just be.
Right, right. No,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting that you bring up mentally as well, because when I started to take my antidepressants, obviously my body became bigger and I put on weight, but I became
Hmm.
happier and I became like just more functional, and that was like
Yeah.
such a price to pay for me,
Hmm.
right? But like the idea was, so what people were essentially like questioning me at that point was, hey, like, but shouldn't you also work out, because like working out is
Hmm.
great for like health, and like you can also
Yeah.
lose this extra weight. And I am like very normative looking, right, in terms of just like beauty, as far as beauty standards go, I'm just like average and like the norm. And if I am receiving comments like this, then I can only imagine what someone who falls
Yeah.
outside of that norm must be hearing,
Yeah.
and what that experience must be like for someone. And also
Yeah.
like, so when I sort of came back at that person who commented on my weight gain because of like antidepressants, I said, hey, but like it's helping me do XYZ, and I'm so much more like just functional. And then I was like, wait a
Hmm.
second, it doesn't have to be like that. Even if I'm just someone who likes to laze around all day, I'm still allowed to like be whatever weight and whatever shape. And I don't like, my
Yeah.
productivity is not a price that I pay for having a particular body type. Um,
Yeah.
so I fully hear you, and I love that we're going on this feminist rant. I'm also curious, Kesang, as to what your experiences are like as a Tibetan person, and how
Hmm.
like determine your body relationship with your body, especially like since you do live in India. What's that like for you?
Um, I think, like, when I was living in Delhi, for, like, when I was in college and a little bit after that, um, there's this like poem that I had written back in 2015, and one of the like, things that I talked about was how, like, on the city streets I'm just another chinky, right? And like, because my everyday experience would be colored by not just my gender, like, how it is living in a big city and being a woman, Delhi, and that would be it, my experiences would not just be gendered, it would also be like colored by race, right? Like, just this body, like, how different it looked from what most people were used to seeing. And I think a lot of the times when I experienced those negative comments on my body, or like, even just like more educated people remarking, like, just going by my face, saying like, oh, I have a friend from the Northeast also, like, even though they're just meeting me for the first time, they would immediately assume that, like, I was either Nepali or, like, from the Northeast. And it would make me, I think, reflect a lot upon um like how I did not belong in many senses. It's not just that, like, I don't belong in terms of citizenship, not just this, like, validation by paper, but also I think just how the like differently uh, we perceive the world or experience the world. I think as a refugee, like, I wouldn't call myself a refugee because my grandparents came to India when they were about my age, right? Like, in their 20s, and my parents were born here. So, like, I'm third generation. So, like, my experiences are much, much more, like, comfortable. Like, I'm much more privileged than, like, they ever have been. But even then, like, uh, having to go through this whole trouble of explaining that, okay, I look like this, but I'm not from the Northeast. I'm Tibetan, right? And then the next question would be, oh, so you're from Tibet? I'm like, not from Tibet, because technically I was born here, but yeah, my parents and grandparents, like, they are Tibetan. And like this whole extended dialogue, having to like, explain my existence. And it's still the same, like, it's 10 years on, like, since I was like thrown out into this, like, whole college wala scene and all, right? Like, and even now, like, I find myself like many, many times like having to explain this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for like answering that question with just so much honesty and vulnerability. And for even wanting to be a part of this conversation when I proposed it to you. And obviously like I cannot come close to like ever understanding what that experience must be like for you to have to justify your appearance and your identity and your body and the way you're taking up space.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous the kind of assumptions that we make about people. I recently, like, someone dropped me a DM and they said, oh, like, you have a rainbow and you've put your pronouns, but you don't look like LGBTQ. And I'm like, that's interesting. That's interesting that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like look a certain way. Um, that is not to say that like I can ever imagine what it must be like to go through what you're going through, but just to say that like yeah, this kind of bias sort of like permeates across like marginalizations and
Hmm.
there's this one notion we have of what a person from a particular part of or like the different identities that person is supposed to embody because they're from one part of the country or
Yeah.
from the and like that's literally all they're supposed to be,
Yeah.
and everybody, the others are not
Yeah.
allowed to contain multitudes within them. Right, and maybe like why can't you hold all these different identities that you have close to you and identify with like all these different identify in all these different
Absolutely.
ways. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love to also hear from you because I know that you run an organization and you run a feminist resource group that works specifically
Hmm.
with Tibetan and other Himalayan communities. So I want to like maybe hear from you about how one combats, not necessarily like a solution, but like how is it that we can
Hmm.
start like imagining our body? How is it that we can start reimagining our identity or claiming our identity?
I think like for me, a lot of the times this my feminist work uh is very closely tied to my spiritual practice. So I wouldn't dare call myself a Buddhist, but like I do like lean very strongly towards Buddhism, right? And I learn a lot from like both my spiritual practice and my political um praxis. And a lot of the times it is merely just what I have learned is that it's not about telling people. We work a lot with like children and youth, right? So it's not about telling people that the way that they have grown up, that the way that they think about certain things is wrong, or like a certain way of like changing their outlook is right. It's not about that. For us, like I think like for the organization and for me, like we try to create spaces in which like people can, young people especially, right, like they can find a space to just talk about what they're feeling, what they're going through, and talk to each other, and to be able to listen to each other. And when we are listening, to approach others with a sense of compassion, where you say that like okay, I don't completely understand what you're talking about, but I will make space for you and acknowledge what you're going through, acknowledge what you're telling me, and maybe even if I don't know exactly how to respond to that right now, like, maybe I'll just like, go home, think about it a little bit, and then maybe we can have another conversation about it, right? It's all about like creating those spaces based on this. A lot of us talk about radical love these days, right? And it's not very different from like, what Buddhism talks about when it comes to compassion in practice. So basically just saying that, okay, you might be completely different from me, like, you don't look anything like me, you have not grown up like me, your education, your family, the structures, the things you care about, your values, they're completely different from mine. But like, how can we exist together
Hmm.
and make space for each other's joy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God, I love that. I love that so, so much. I love that answer. I'm gonna take a moment to like just absorb. So it's beautiful that you also talk about how spirituality or even at times religion can actually
Yeah.
serve for you to like empathize with people of just like different bodies and identities
Yeah.
and genders and sexuality in a deeper way. Like that is
Yeah.
what your practice, spiritual or religious, is. I mean, they're the same thing at all, but like
Yeah.
what it's supposed to aid you with. That is not to be confused with culture, right? This idea,
Yeah.
this cultural notion that some folks are better than others, or um,
Hmm.
that's a whole other debate. We'll get into it some other day. But no, so this is beautiful that you actually speak about how your practice, how your Buddhism practice serves you in a way where it makes you more empathetic, and also like being like just to add to what you said, which is approaching people with compassion, approaching people with just like curiosity. Also, like curiosity is not a bad
Yeah.
thing at all. Um,
Yeah.
Curiosity coupled with compassion, and just being open to receiving what the other person has to offer to you in terms of like the space that they're occupying, or their identity location, can actually be such a beautiful, fulfilling
Yeah.
experience. And like all of us
Absolutely.
in the pandemic have made so many internet friends, so we know that that's definitely from across the world, so we know that that's
Yeah.
definitely possible to
Yeah.
yeah, to just like come together and sort of get to know each other like more than anything else. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think I wanted to point out that, like, from my side, just reflecting on the current situation in India,
Mm,
and even Nepal, our neighbor, and like looking back at the past year,
mm,
um, it's such a privilege that we are able to sit in the comfort and safety of our homes and like, talk about these things, like, reflect on these things. And even for the people watching, like, a lot of us, like, are safe, are healthy, and it
mm.
is really not something that, like, we should take for granted, for sure, but then, like, also a privilege that we do need to reflect upon a lot. Yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Love that. I thank you so much for yeah, just like leaving us on that note. And like you said, the idea is not for us to feel guilty or feel debilitated by the guilt.
Yeah.
It's more to like acknowledge our privilege and extend that like same compassion that we've been talking about, empathy that we've been talking about, and whatever that may look like for each person. For some folks it may be donating to people. For some folks it may
Yeah.
look, going on the field and volunteering. I know that a few of my friends have just been doing grocery runs for
Yeah.
um, people around them, and it's interesting to note just like how we perceive bodies in this era of like hyper scrutiny of bodies, right?
Yeah.
Because the actually vests in our, like if we were to get it, it does vest in our bodies. And you're constantly having to protect yourself, you're constantly having to take care of your body, and
Yeah.
in such an environment, in such a context,
Yeah.
maybe like you said at the beginning of the session, right, to challenge those notions of like what we think is what bodies and what identities do we think are just worthy of existing. uh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And like I think just having gone through this, like, collective experience in the last, like, 1.5 sort of years, remarking upon, like, people's bodies, and even, like, being worried about, like, whether you've become fat or thinner, or, like, pimples or not, like, rather than looking at, like, this physical manifestation of what's on the surface, like, that's the least of our concerns, right? And
Mhm.
for people like you and me who have been, like, privileged enough, like, who are privileged enough to actually um be safe and healthy in our own homes, and loved, surrounded by people that we love. I think, like, this is really an opportunity for people like us to repair our relationships with our bodies and ourselves, right? Like, for me, I have, like, I might have gained weight, but for me, it's not about, like, how many kgs I have gained. Like, I know exactly how many, but it's more about, like, what happened, like, am I comfortable with who I am, where I am right now? Is my body reflecting the sort of mental health struggles that I have gone through in the past year? Like, is it a reflection of that? Like, if my lower back is aching a little more than, like, it used to last year, like, why is that? Am I lying around in my bed too much? Well, yes, I am. It's a pandemic. But then, like, okay, what can I do to make the pain better? Right?
Mm.
So these are the questions that I'm asking myself, rather than saying that, like, okay, I have gained this many kilos, I have gained, like, two extra pimples this month, like, rather than that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No disputes to what you're saying whatsoever, and I love that, like, you also contextualize it in, like, bringing it back to, like, COVID, right? And
Yeah.
saying that has definitely had an impact on our body, our mental health, our physical health, everything, and identity, wherein you bring privilege up as well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I also do understand, because I just had, like, a phase in the middle, like, sometime late last year, where I was like, my body was changing, and, like, I think I was in denial that it was changing, and I was sort of
Yeah.
like trying to convince myself, oh, it's because of the pandemic. Like, once the pandemic is over, I will lose this weight, and it will look better, and I will, like, get fit and get the discipline in,
Yeah.
right? Like, this idea that somehow the world is going to get reversed to where it was previously, and
Yeah.
therefore I will be able to reverse my body to where it
Yeah.
was, or, like, I relate to the world to the way I used to previously.
Yeah.
But, like, I also went through a phase where I was, like, obsessing over my appearance, and, like, I was feeling extremely insecure because I was doing a lot more work online, and, like, I was constantly, like, facilitating or on lives or, like, talking, and people just saw me a lot more, and I saw myself a lot more.
Hmm.
Otherwise, like, when you're just, like, in the world, right, you're not really looking at yourself
Yeah.
as constantly.
On the screen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So just that, like, yeah, it's okay for you to, like, go through those phases, and but it's what's not your case for you to project your insecurities onto other people, and to, like,
Yeah.
comments about yeah, weight or appearance or pimples or, like,
Hmm.
hair or whatever,
Yeah.
about other people, and definitely, like Kesan said, to also, like, think about it as, okay, so things have changed. What is it that I can now do to navigate this new situation better? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And any final message, Kesan, for our audience members?
Really? I don't know. For me, it's just like, it's just been a journey of reflecting on the connection between this physical body and this, like, being, right? We are
Hmm.
made up of not just our bodies,
Hmm.
and, like, this is just one part of us.
Hmm. Hmm.
So taking this existence, taking this really, really precious human life as a whole, and thinking about it, valuing it, and loving. Like, you might not be able to love yourself perfectly, but and your version of love might look a little different than, like, what social media says love should look like. But it's I think like, all of us need to sort of like sit with ourselves a little bit and think about that more often. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, that reflection piece, and I think people should just definitely go back and look at the different reflection pieces that you've given us throughout. Uh,
It's not homework, sorry.
no, homework is great. I think like people on my page understand that, and people on your page understand that like we're big on this homework thing. So it's your homework. Maybe
Yeah.
like what you reflect on is what is the way in which you're relating with your body today, and what is the way in which you're going to try and show it some love. And yeah, like Kesang, you said, it can look different on different days. It can look very different from what is portrayed on social media. But yeah, each one of
Mm.
us figuring it out and going on our own journeys and sitting with ourselves. Thank you so much for speaking to me. And yeah, I hope like
Thanks for
I know we're gonna
inviting
take,
me.
yeah. I definitely know that we're gonna take this conversation offline, and we're gonna have like more
Yeah,
interesting thoughts about it, and
absolutely.
come
Absolutely.
up with more things. We'll share it with y'all. Yeah. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.